Awesome. We are live. Thank you all for joining us. And I will let Dr. Rochelle Gregory take it away.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Dr. Rochelle Gregory, and I'm going to get us started. So if you are unfamiliar with Temple Grandin, she is a world-renowned scientist and scholar, and she's also autistic. And so in 2020, 1 in 54 Americans were diagnosed with autism, and they have more resources and services available than ever before. However, this was not always the case. Autism was stigmatizing, and many people with autism were misunderstood. Temple Grandin has worked to promote more understanding about autism, and in her essay, Seeing in Beautiful, Precise Pictures, that many of you are reading in your English 1301 course, she describes for readers how she thinks in pictures and sounds rather than in abstraction. For Dr. Grandin, this means that when someone says the word love, she sees a catalog of images that represent that idea. So she would see a mother and child, or images from a film, or lyrics from a song. This concrete way of seeing the world is what made it difficult for Dr. Grandin growing up, because she didn't understand abstract concepts like be nice or don't be bad. And instead, she needed concrete examples like we give flowers when we love someone to be nice, or we don't hit each other when we're angry. This pragmatism served Dr. Grandin well when she began working with animals, because Dr. Grandin understood concepts like death, pain, and suffering in concrete ways. And she was able to identify tangible ways to alleviate suffering by developing humane slaughterhouses. Dr. Grandin believes that her autism has enabled her to see and experience the world differently, and she is proud to be autistic. Dr. Grandin challenged that what people had believed about autism, and in doing so, her work has promoted the ethical treatment of animals. Dr. Grandin has been actively working and publishing since the 1970s, and she's published more than 60 scientific papers on animal welfare and animal behavior. She earned her PhD from the University of Illinois, her master's from Arizona State University, and her bachelor's from Franklin Pierce College. And currently, she is a faculty member at Colorado State University. So we are hosting this event as an opportunity to introduce you to Temple Grandin, who will be on campus to meet our students and the community on Thursday, April 7th, 2022 in Gainesville at the CPA. This event will be free and open to the public and will be open to students, so be on the lookout for more information about tickets after the first of the year. With that said, it's my pleasure then to turn over this metaphorical microphone to Ms. Ellen Black and Dr. Lisa Bellows, who will be telling us more about Dr. Grandin's important work and how it is informed by her experiences as an autistic woman.
Thank you, Dr. Gregory. It's a pleasure and an honor to be able to talk to you today, because we're getting to share our knowledge from the agriculture perspective. Chair the Division of Agriculture here at North Central Texas College. I grew up around livestock, rodeo livestock, and animals on a farm, cattle, horses, swine, those types of animals, and attended, commission companies like sale barns and things like that as a young child. And so the way that livestock were handled in the 60s and 70s has been transformed drastically because of people like Dr. Grandin, and especially Dr. Grandin, because she had a gift of giving us an insight into what the animal was experiencing. And she has, in her writing as a professional, mathematics, statistics, there's a lot of scientific basis in what she was able to be the spearhead of introducing. So back in when I was growing up, cattle prods, loud noises, animals had transformed from an agrarian lifestyle in which an animal served as your milk source and your meat source, but you raised the animal that you consumed the product from. And so your treatment of that animal was different than when we became sort of a a factory of animal production with slaughterhouses and commission companies and hauling and moving livestock, especially cattle, in mass for the purpose of feeding human beings that were not their profession was not related to the care of the animal. And so there were some very inhumane practices back in the day whenever we were doing that. And so I've got to meet Dr. Grandin and be in her presence and hear her. And it's very evident that, her passion and then understanding the livestock side, those came together, and we do things very different than we did before. So Ellen Black is with us. She is from Dallas, and she's moved to Gainesville. She's on the Gainesville campus, and she's an equine instructor here at North Central Texas College, and has her hands on animals every day. She has a bachelor's degree and almost a master's degree. She's in the final dots and lines of her master's degree, in both degrees in animal science from Texas A&M University. So with that, Ms. Black, what do you see? There's a generational gap between what I observed as a youngster and growing up and coming into the agricultural industry, and you're a much younger and have had different experiences. So what would you view Temple Grandin's contribution to animal welfare?
Well, I'll start with what you kind of mentioned already about how we used to handle livestock. And I think that's kind of the picture a lot of people have in their head that aren't informed. We think about people using cattle prods and bullwhips and trying to move cattle quickly. And it's all kind of rough and heavy and maybe kind of like, the cowboy way to move animals. But Dr. Grandin started introducing techniques that made it less stressful for the animals. And by doing that, you were treating the animals better. And then as her techniques were implemented, people have found that actually it's more efficient. You get a better product. And so she's widely considered the leading expert on humane animal handling practices. And some of her changes more specifically were changes to holding pens and walkways, and thinking about how to get cattle moving forward, how to get cattle moving through pens quickly without them getting holed up and stuck in one area of a pen. And so she did this by thinking about just even like the curve of a wall. How do I find a way to make a cattle want to follow a wall? And so that included things like widening a walkway so cattle don't feel like they're being kind of funneled into a narrow area where they can't go through. Other things like making walls higher, making walls solid so that the cattle aren't distracted and overstimulated by all the chaos going on around them. And then, like I said, adding in curve shape, or in some of her designs, it was like a herringbone shape that will allow more of a natural flow for cattle to go through. And she also thought about things like adding lights to different walkways, different holding pens. Cattle, animals in general want to be where there's light. Unless you're a cat, you don't want to be holed up in a cave somewhere. And so adding light to the areas where you want a cow to go will help them be encouraged to move forward into that area. And so I think people either see it two sides, right? Like either it's all for welfare or we're just trying to get the most efficient animal possible. And from a producer standpoint, it's both. And now we want the animal to be well taken care of because we want to treat that animal right. That's part of our duty as animal stewards. But it also is a bonus for us because study after study has shown that animals that are in low stress environments actually have higher yields. Lots of studies, that show weaning weights of calves. They'll compare them to like a control group that's being handled with conventional methods. So louder, using things like cattle prods or bull whips, or even just kind of awkwardly set up chutes, and then comparing those calving weights or weaning weights, with calves that are handled in low stress techniques. So using some of the pen and chute designs that she's come up with. And time after time, you'll see that those calves that are handled in low stress environments have 2 to 4 times the weaning weight than those that are handled more aggressively. And so I feel like I'm kind of going on and on about this one, but it's a good question, right? And so this emphasis on welfare started with Temple Grandin going to Cargill in the 90s and saying, I have an idea for how to improve cattle handling. And Cargill started implementing these ideas and found that it was better for everybody. It was better for the cattle. It was better and safer for the handlers. And they got a better product in the end. So it's a win-win-win. And then from there, other companies started taking on that same approach. And now this emphasis on welfare has led to things like third-party auditing, video audits, and things like that. So you can get a real transparent look into the meat industry and the livestock industry and make sure that animals are being handled properly and safely.
Great response to that, and a lot of insight on your part in that. So let me kind of go back and pull a little bit more out of it. So for our audience that has no experience with agriculture, we usually sell our product by weight. Is that correct, or by mass? So when we take an animal off of its feed source and its water source to transport it, or just prior to being sold or slaughtered, there's a term we call shrink. And so they urinate and defecate and so they lose weight. And the more stress they have, the more weight they lose in those transitional activities, transportation, etc. So have you seen, I think I've seen some things in my lifetime that are different, like, for instance, shipping cattle maybe a day or two early before sale so that they can be placed on feed and water. Do you think Temple Grandin had an influence in that, even though it may not have been absolute direct? We know we have to do this because Temple Grandin says so, but do you think she's had industry influence? And could you reflect just a little bit on that?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it goes exactly what you said. It's kind of bled into other things. Even if it wasn't direct, it wasn't a Temple Grandin practice or technique to kind of edit shipping or handling times. People see the results of animals being handled in low stress environments, and now people are thinking, well, how can I start doing that even sooner? What if instead of they're not stressed when they're at the plant, what if they're not stressed for 5 days before they're slaughtered? Then what happens? And I've seen that even transfer into trailering horses. And so now we're trying to get to a horse show 2 days early so our horses can have a chance to relax, get used to the environment. And, sometimes when you haul them on a trailer, they get nervous, they get drawn up. Like you said, they lose weight. And so that kind of transfers even to I handle my own horses. I try to make sure we're at a show a day early. So they have a time to kind of get relaxed and set up. And I think that's largely in part due to Dr. Grandin and this huge new wave of animal welfare. It's touched more than just, cattle right before they're slaughtered, how they're handled.
Exactly. So do you think that that Temple Grandin being an autistic individual, do you think that has played a significant role in her empathy in the lives of animals?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's what Dr. Gregory was saying, how she kind of sees things in pictures. And so it's often hard for us to think about, but animals don't see the world we do. They don't speak our same language. They don't have the same thought processes we have. And autism, and especially the difficulties in nonverbal communication and kind of getting a sensory overload, those are kind of similar to how you could see an animal seeing the world, right? If I tell a cow, go through that chute, they don't know what I'm saying. They don't understand my language. And not saying that autistic people don't understand our language, but there is a difference in how they see the world and how they take in information. And it's just like that for animals. And so I think I've read and heard her say this, that when she saw things like the dipping trough, where they would dip cattle, she was thinking, I wonder what it's like to go through that, and what it's like to go through that trough, and how can we make it better? And I don't think normally we think about that. I certainly, a lot of times when I'm handling my horse, I don't always think, I wonder how my horse is seeing this, scary box in the corner. But that's how Temple Grandin sees the world. It's different than how we do, and it's more similar to how an animal does. And kind of thinking about her, how she's seeing the world in pictures, that's how the animal sees the world, right? They just see what's in front of them. And so finding a way to make that picture that the cow sees as low stress as possible. How do we make that the most good, oh, you should go this way picture for a cow? That helps the animal a lot. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in some of the content we have later in this, but her designing chutes and things to think about how do we take down the sensory overload for an animal, because that's things she experienced being autistic, is having a sensory overload and needing things to be kind of quieted so she could take in information better. Those same kinds of thoughts and processing in her own mind really translated into how she sees animals. I've taught people who have autism, and it's amazing that they just see the world different. It's not wrong or anything. It's different how we see it, and being able to present information in a different way makes things click. And I mean, the results speak for themselves on her animal handling techniques, is that if you implement a different strategy, it really makes a huge difference in how that animal responds to the environment and gets through the process with a lot less stress.
Cool. Well, let's lead into a few of the things that pertain to NCTC and the way we handle livestock. So the question that I will pose is, does NCTC use any of Dr. Grandin's methods in handling livestock? So can you clarify that just a little bit? And please include how you approach the training of young colts.
Okay. Well, we'll show a video here in a second of some of the different chutes we have at NCTC for working cattle and how those are influenced by Temple Grandin. And it's just amazing how her influence is seen in something even we're putting our hands on every day. That's something she influenced. And the video will go into more detail, but something we've been doing in our colt starting class is really putting an emphasis on exposing those colts to a lot of things that they don't normally encounter, and getting them used to having the reaction of relaxation instead of panic. So we have things like, we had a costume contest, and so we had one student put balloons all over their horse, and that horse was a bunch of grapes as the costume. And before we tied 50 balloons on that colt, we brought balloons to class 3 days before, and we rubbed balloons all over all the horses. We popped balloons in front of all the horses. All the horses had to get used to the balloons, even if it wasn't going to be on them. And that way, when that horse encounters a balloon, maybe they're going to be around somebody who doesn't know how to handle a horse. And I want to ensure, or at least know, that we did as much as we could to prepare that animal for something that could be really stressful, like a balloon popping in their face. You never know when a little kid might run up with a balloon and accidentally pop. And we try to introduce stuff like that as much as we can to those horses so that their life is better, because they are trained and know how to respond to things that are unexpected.
So how long from the time that a young colt comes onto campus at the beginning of the semester, just like a student coming on the first day of the semester, how much time and how far do you go in a semester with a colt?
It's a good question. It depends on their age. Right now we have long yearlings, so there are horses that are a year old. They'll turn 2 years in January. So they're not old enough to be ridden, but we get them from when they've maybe had a halter on 1 or 2 times. And what we'll do is we'll take them from that stage in October when we start classes. By December, they're saddled, they've been bridled, and we do what's called ground driving, where basically we drive them around we're just walking behind them, and the horse knows how to steer and stop and back up, and we take them over bridges and trail obstacles and logs, and we run them over tarps and expose them to as much as we can. And so that's in the spring. That's how much we expect to get out of them. Then to be really quiet, to be caught, saddled, bathed. They can stand tied up and not try to sit back with the halter on. Then be able to go over obstacles. Basically, when they're this young, we want them to be ready and mentally prepared to have someone swing a leg over their back for the first time. And then in the spring, we'll take colts that are at that stage, they're ready to have a leg swung over them, and then we'll start from there. We'll get on, we'll do the first ride, and we'll go all the way through when we finish the semester in May. And by then, that horse should be walk, trot, loping around, steering really well, backing up, and kind of started on a few little maneuvers. And again, it depends on the horse, right? Not all horses learn the same, just like not all people learn the same. But that's our general goal.
So when I grew up around breaking horses, we did things a little bit different. And so sometimes we would put a halter on them and tie them to a tree or tie them to a pole and leave them all day long until they just were exhausted. Or we might just saddle them and then just get on them and they bucked. And so, yeah, in a few days you were riding a horse, but forever in your relationship with that horse, in the early morning when it was cool, that horse was going to buck with you.
Yeah.
And that horse was going to try everything you would let that horse get away with. And so what I see in the time that Dr. Grandin has influenced animal husbandry and the handling of livestock is that we've gone from what I saw as a youngster around horses to what you just described. A lot of input, time, relationship building, trust building in a low stress environment to prepare an animal for the purpose of riding the horse or using the horse for work in some way. So we talk a lot about cattle. We talk a whole lot about cattle with Dr. Grandin's influence on the cattle industry. But I think it's important to understand that she has influenced not just cattle, but horses and all aspects of agricultural livestock.
Yeah, absolutely.
So do you have some input on how we would handle cattle at NCTC with some of our facilities and how our facilities have been influenced by her methods?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of it is coming to working cattle on foot. And part of that comes from a handler perspective, knowing how to handle a cow, knowing how to read a cow's flight zone and the driving point and things like that. And I think her techniques work so perfectly with this new generation of people in agriculture because most people in ag nowadays, or I'd say probably at least half, haven't grown up in ag. They're learning it for the first time. And so they need to learn because they don't have the skills or the knowledge to handle a cow in a high stress environment. The cow goes to run them over, they might not even notice, that it's coming at them. And her techniques and stuff like that really enable those people to be involved and still be safe. And so things like that would be putting cows through chutes instead of we're going to rope a cow, out in the pasture, we're going to rope it to give it medicine, to doctor it. Instead, we'll run it through a chute. And then a student can actually get their hands on a cow and they can actually, put in an ear tag instead of, well, we only have one student in this class that can rope, so that's the only kid that can be involved. Now everybody can be involved and really get their hands on it. And it's just better for everybody, better for the animals, better for the students.
Okay. Do we have a clip that we may be able to show our audience some of our facilities here at NCTC?
Well, howdy guys, I'm Ellen Black. I'm the equine instructor here at North Central Texas College, and we're excited to talk to you guys a little bit about our upcoming visit with Temple Grandin to talk about cattle handling and the different kinds of pen setups we have here at NCTC. When animals are handled and they're in an environment they're not used to, there can be a lot of stress for them. And Temple Grandin in her research was able to identify a lot of kind of antique ways that we handled cattle and how that caused stress to the animal. So from an animal welfare standpoint, that made a lot of issues be brought up and even efficiency as far as handling cattle. And if animals are stressed, they don't have much of a yield and they're not as healthy for even just economic value and things like that. So through her research, she started identifying ways that we can handle cattle and make them less stressful. And so in olden days, we would use cattle prods and bull whips. There'd be a lot of shouting and yelling, trying to get cattle moved quickly. But through her research, she developed a lot of ways to handle cattle just with different pen setups, and realizing different angles to corners and gates can make it easier to handle cattle on foot, and that would cause less stress for the animal. So you can see these cattle behind us are just loafing in the shed. They're relaxing in the sun. They're in a very low stress environment right now. So what we're going to do is provide a stimulus to these cows just through a bullwhip, through a noise. And I want y'all to look at the reaction the cattle have and see if something changes in their behavior. All right, well, we're here today in our cattle chutes, and I'm going to kind of walk y'all through the layout of our pens, and y'all can see why it's made the way it is and how it helps cattle when we're working them. So if you look here at our chute, it's in a curved shape. This gives the cow an easy wall to follow, and instead of giving like a sharp corner where they can get stuck, they have this nice curved line to follow around before they go into the chute. So when we come further in the pen, you can see how these walls are solid. That's to kind of block out any outside distractions, so the cows aren't looking around at something that's outside, and they'll just follow this wall around. Once they're in this pen, this door swings forward to keep moving them farther in. And then they come here, right? This is the part of the chute we're trying to get them to go into. And we've got these open bars here so it's light, and the cows have one opening to go to, and they want to go towards the light, right? Animals don't want to be in like dark kind of cave environments. So this is dark and blocked to kind of keep them moving, and then they want to move towards this light open space. And so we have this chute. Well, this will close, and the animal will continue into the chute, and then we can step out here if needed to move on the side. Okay. And so once they're in the chute, we've got different levers and stuff to move the chutes. We can pull this, and this will squeeze the cow. You can see how these panels move together. And what that does is act almost like, think of like the weighted blankets everybody's buying nowadays, right? That weigh, so when you can lay down, that pressure on you is calming. It's the same kind of concept for an animal. So we do this squeeze chute, it'll squeeze the sides of their body and make them feel less nervous because it's giving that steady pressure that's almost like a comfort blanket. All right, and if we move further down, we'll keep moving up into this chute, and here's where we have a bunch of different openings on our gates and stuff so we can access different parts of the cow that keeps the cow safe and ourselves safe, right? So we want to keep the cow confined, but also be able to access whatever part of the body we need to. So same thing here, we also have a squeeze, and we have all these different gates that open. So while the cow's in, if we need to get to their neck, we can open this, reach in here around their shoulder. If we need to give them an injection, there's another little gate here where we can reach in. And the cow's head will be through this chute, so their head will stick out the front, and then the rest of their body is back here where we can access them. And we can even pull out these lower panels if we need to get to something on their lower leg, or if we're dealing with a cow we need to palpate, these back doors open so we can reach in and palpate the cow from the back. And like I said, these squeeze chutes are there to keep the cow safe and the cow comfortable, but also keep us safe. That way, if we're trying to handle a cow and give a shot or something, they're not moving around. That keeps us safe and also lets us do our job correctly for the animal.
Very nice. Thank you. And I want to thank Elizabeth Boo with our marketing department for going out and shooting and editing that video. I knew a lot about Temple Grandin, as almost everyone who's responded to this event seems to already know a lot about Temple Grandin. We're all very excited that she's going to be here in April. What I didn't know is that we were using her methods here at NCTC. So thank you so much for sharing with all of us that we are using methods inspired by Dr. Grandin. So thank you all for joining us today. Thank you again to Dr. Lisa Bellows and to Professor Ellen Buck and to Dr. Rochelle Gregory.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.